Another component of the intermediate phase is to work with background shapes. Okay, and this also will scaffold and work with transparency. So if I have a shape on this document, let me just draw a shape. How many background colors do I have now to work with? 2. It's a little bit more complicated. How does the axis sort of work with this, right? So how does an axis work with this? Grab this axis and I'm going to move my axis, place it, say, right here. So the reason I placed it here is that I wanted it to run in parallel with the shape that I constructed. I thought that that would look more like they belong together, or another term would be harmony. They're more like in harmony with one another. Another way that I could see this axis being placed is like this, because I have 2 parallel lines. And this is playing off of a Gestalt principle called parallelism. So there's an actual formal design principle and psychology of how users engage with information called parallelism. So if I put them in parallel, they look like they're sort of connected together. Now I could use that in a different way. I could break parallelism. So I could break parallelism. So in this case, I'm breaking the parallelism. Now, why would I want to do that? To make it really tense, to make it really like, oh, this is different. I didn't expect this. There's different reasons. There's a place for breaking it, and there's a place for using it. And it's up to you to decide which one is better suited for your problem. What's a better solution for you? So if you want something that looks really exaggerated and unusual, you might want to break that principle. But if you want things to look more like they're connected or in harmony, then maybe you want to use the principle where it's not broken, but working in harmony with one another. I'm going to work in this sort of parallel structure, and I'm going to put them a little bit more closely together. And I'm still going to work with a pivot. I'm going to present a pivot on this design, say right here. I'll make it a little bit bigger. We can see that in this composition, we have 2 different background colors. We have a pivot point, so a point of emphasis right there. And I might leave that empty to sort of act as a placeholder for a logo. Now I have my typographical structure that I want to incorporate in my design. And I've been working with 8 lines. So I'm going to try to stick to 8 lines of text. All right, so Control-C, Control-V. All right. All right, all the lines of text are the same color. They're all the same value. Are they all perceived to be the same value? No, why not? Exactly, the background color is close in value to it, so the contrast is not as severe there. So it gets kind of washed out. It's like a transparent illusion, right? It's the same thing we saw when I lightened the boxes up earlier. The consideration there is that they act as a device that you need to contemplate how that will influence the perception of the text. Now, what if I do this? What happens now? Where's the hierarchy? Where's number 1 on the hierarchy? Yeah, it's more contrast. Yeah. This is contrast. That's all we're playing with. The contrast basically creates that really high sort of demand on your eye. Your eye just kind of latches onto it. You don't want to let go. So check this out. Look what's going to happen when I change this background color. I'm going to change it to black. Even more contrast. One thing that, as a designer, that is hard to learn is subtlety, how to work with subtlety. And this is not subtle. This is very severe. One of the concerns when you work with design that's really severe, really high contrast, the separation or the distinction between one area of the composition versus the other area of the composition are too strong. And what I mean by that is they look like two very distinct containers, two very distinct objects. And what happens is that one container dominates the other, and it doesn't want to release your attention. So if I wanted to achieve that, I just want you to look inside this box. Then I would want really severe contrast. But this might be so much contrast that it's hard to let go. It's hard to not look at this and move your attention from this space to this space. If I go to a lighter contrast, now that severity is not so strong. There's still contrast there, but because it's not so powerful, the boxes are not so clear from one another, they're not so obviously disconnected, my attention can now move from one block into the other space a little bit more efficiently. So be careful with contrast. Sometimes it's too powerful. And if you do want the user to see everything, sometimes you need to balance them, have them more of an equal sort of presentation in terms of value for your eye to release and move on to the next block of information. But this is using a box or a container, a background element in this sort of intermediate presentation. Okay, now let's do another one. We'll do one more. I've trained my eye not to see this stuff. So I've trained my eye, so I just focus on the things inside the page. So I'm sorry if it bothers you, but it's something you're going to have to learn to train yourself to just ignore outside of the trim. Remember, the black line is your trim. Okay, and I'm going to do this. Maybe I'll add another circle. I'm just kind of making this up as I go along. So this has more of an organic line. Shapes, this is shapes, okay. And this. Move it in the opposite direction. So once again, axis, it's on a diagonal, it's running parallel. So sometimes if you have an organic shape, it may influence the way that you position the text, or it might look more in harmony if you position the text to wrap or follow the shape. And I think we looked at stuff like that when we investigated text wrap around a shape. The text boxes might be better suited to follow the contours of the background shape, sort of connected. I'm just trying to see how I could solve. If I had this background, this kind of bubble-like background, how would I arrange my typography to get it to work right? And currently, I don't really have a whole lot of good hierarchy. So let's see if I can play with the hierarchy here a little bit. Add a little bit of contrast. Right, and I'll change this. So I'm modulating the value, and here I'm also going to modulate the size of my blocks. So this can represent a larger font face, more like a title. Okay, and then what happens if I make it black? Oh, it's not changing it. Come on. There we go. What happens if I make it black? What happens if I make these lighter? Let's make these even lighter. What starts to happen with the text and how it's read? First, second, third, possibly. Here it is inside an organic shape.